What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Shot Callers Esports Studios for another stellar Monday afternoon. I'm Eric Kummel, and no Mark in studio today. So that's right, it's another one of those dreadful times where you have to listen to my voice for the entire hour. God bless us all. Hope we can get through it. Week 3 of the LCS is in the books. Another spicy weekend. Games are finally getting a little bit shorter, and it's the rise of teams that had some actual expectations. TSM came through with the 2-0 week. First time they've had that this split, and they're finally looking better. Some of the communication issues are getting better. They're definitely not fixed by any means, and there's still a long way to go for TSM, but they're on the up and up. They knocked off 100 Thieves in their second match of the week, which was obviously their biggest one. They beat Golden Guardians earlier on, but 100 Thieves was the big matchup, and you know, even though they got a little bit behind early in that match, they were able to come back, and there were some key moments that we're going to look at here that kind of broke down the game. Again, 2 early kills for 100 Thieves to get them out to an early lead, but they were just able to survive some ganks by Someday and eventually get a kill here. Great Weaver's Wall by Bjergsen, who looked pretty solid on that Talia. Sven didn't have to do an insane amount in this game, to be honest. And Hanser played out of his mind this whole weekend. We'll talk about more of that later on. 2 games of Gangplank, and he looked real good in this one. But TSM able to come back into this one. Then you had this key Baron fight after they had caught out Meteos. Look at this cleanse by Sven. That is Captain Jack-esque. He survives and is really no harm in this team fight. But they get this Baron after catching out Meteos, and they just end up racking up some kills here. And that was the main turning point in this game. They just already had a decent gold lead off some turrets, but that really snowballed things forward. And then later on, 100 Thieves tried to take down Hanser with 3 guys, but Bjergsen comes, saves him, gets the kill onto Meteos. And it took a little while, you know. TSM did get a little too antsy, try and end the game. Got a little too greedy on the push, end up giving up a triple kill to Cody-san. So not the cleanest of endings to this game, but I mean, they were in control for pretty much the entirety of this one, and despite getting a little too overeager there, they would eventually close this one out, and they looked very solid there. Their macro was much better. They had a gold lead, a couple thousand gold lead without really having many more kills. It was an even game in terms of kills. So their macro play and movement around the map was much better in week 2. This team finally slowly starting to get to the level that we were expecting them to be at coming into this season. And for 100 Thieves, it was a bit of a tough week for them. They had that crazy game against Clutch that they probably shouldn't have won. And that one, again, the game against TSM, it was in TSM's hands for the majority, pretty much the entirety of that game, save for the very early stages. So 100 Thieves get taken down a peg, and TSM move to 3-3. They're now 500 for all this. The sky is falling. It's the end of the world for TSM. They're back to 500. Not really much of a concern. It's still only week 3. This team is going to be okay. Echo Fox had the hottest start to the split, 5-0 after they, 4-0 coming into this week. And CLG, of all teams, who looked like absolute poop in week 2, was the team to hand Echo Fox their first loss on the split. And CLG heading into this week, they look terrible. They look terrible, but they look like a totally different team in week 3, and they had to play at a way better level to knock off Echo Fox, and that is exactly what they did in the opening game of week 3. And again, they looked like they were in trouble early on. Dardoch getting first blood on Hui with a sweet gank, and Echo Fox was out to a couple of thousand gold lead early on this one, thanks to a nice Zhonya's from Phoenix. They'd get Huki again, but there was some Baron fights. This was back and forth. Both teams eventually locked up a Baron, and this was very close, which I'm sure people weren't expecting to see such favorable trades for both teams. And then it came down to one big team fight against the Elder Dragon, and let's break it down here. Dardoch gets a little too overeager with the engage here, goes in, forces the Flash E into the opposing team, and you look at that. 4 players are not really with Dardoch on this one. They didn't get the memo for the dive here, so CLG just focuses Dardoch and is going to absolutely blow him up. And then we pause it again here. You got Biofrost with a nice Flash Glacial Fissure, which blocks off 2 of the Echo Fox members. And then you're going to see Adrian and Hooney stuck on this side. Adrian's going to get completely exploded by Stixxay, who then Fates calls in Biofrost again to toss him back out at Hooney. They're going to clean up that kill again. And you've also got the Drowsy on Altec, which is key here because he's zoned out. He can't do anything. He actually Zanya's instead of using any damage, which is a whoopsies. But Stixxay then smells the pentakill. He's not going to get it, though. A couple of flashes away. But CLG close down this fight, chase it down, eventually get the ace. And they just close it out from here. It was an even game pretty much heading into that Elder Dragon fight. But they win that team fight clean 5-0, and they close it out from there. A fantastic performance from CLG. They just looked like a totally different team in that game than they did in week 2. Stixxay was playing much better, and a lot of the early aggression in the jungle for Reignover actually worked. He wasn't just inting, feeding his face off, so that's always a positive going forward. And yeah, specifically that bottom lane looked rock solid for CLG, which was the biggest question mark after the first 2 weeks. Stixxay was honestly looking like the worst AD carry in the league, just completely caught out of position and frontlining in spots that he shouldn't have been for CLG. So much better in week 3. He looked great in both games for CLG. Against FlyQuest as well, he had some key plays on that Cogmoss, some nice flashes, and most importantly, he wasn't getting caught out. So TSM and CLG combined go 4-0 in week 3. A lot of people were panicking, saying, oh my God, these teams had some expectations. They're the old gods of the NA/LCS, and they're sitting near the bottom of the standings. What are we going to do? Well, a 4-0 week certainly helps, and it's still very early on. So you can rise through the rankings pretty quickly with so many teams so close. So now we got 3 teams at 5-1, and we'll get to our power rankings in a little bit to break down the standings more and how teams are looking going forward. There has been some changes in both the EU and NA power rankings, so we'll get to those in a sec. And make sure, by the way, you're sending in your questions. As you always do on this show, I will be answering them a little later. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of competitive league going on, but there were some standout performers from week 3 in the LCS. You know, it's our favorite little segment of the honors and reports. You got to report someone after every game to get your anger out, and of course, you got to honor for some of the fat loots that you can get after games. So let's start with the happiness. Let's start with the honorable teammates from week 3, starting in NA, and it's one of those old teams from the NALCS. It's TSM's Hauntzer in the top lane. I mentioned him earlier. 2 games on Gangplank, 13 KDA, more than a third of the team's kills, or pretty much a third of the team's kills, and 659 damage a minute. He was dominant on that Gangplank, just constantly drawing pressure in both that Echo Fox and that FlyQuest game. There was 2 3-man dives against him, 3-man ganks, just adding so much pressure. And in some of these team fights, he was still 2-shotting people. And I mean, you're just seeing the high praise, the high priority teams are putting on this Gangplank. He's been featured quite a bit early on in these early LCS weeks. Even with that nerf to Klepto, didn't really affect Gangplank that much. And it's obviously a champion that Hauntzer can play super well. And he showcased that in week 3. And I think he's a guy who sometimes people think are a little bit overrated on TSM, and has been, because he's just an NA guy who's, you know, he talks a lot of smack, but I mean, he puts up most of the time. He's been a top 3 top laner for the last couple of years on TSM, and you know, he was one of the key shining moments for TSM this week. There were a lot of good moments, but I think Hauntzer's the guy I'm picking to stand out on this team. He's the guy that I'm honoring at the end of the game for a 2-0 week for TSM. Expect a lot more solid play out of Hauntzer, and obviously he output so much damage because he was playing that Gangplank twice. But he's got a wide champion pool, and I'm sure we'll see him dip into it later on in this LCS season. Let's jump to EU. EU Honorable Player of the Week. We got to give it to an entire team because they performed so well. That is G2 Esports. You just couldn't pick one guy to honor on this squad, so you got to give all 5 of them a little bit of an honor so that you get some bonus stuff after that. these numbers are actually insane. Obviously, G2 went 2-0 this week. Looked a lot better than they did in weeks 1 and 2. A 22.6 KDA for the entire team. That's across all 5 members over 2 games. They only died 3 times as a team in those 2 games. Now, yes, they were very low kill, low scoring games in those matchups against H2K and, oh, who else did they play? We're going to get back to that. They only had 3 deaths, though. So that's absolutely absurd to go through 2 games. And 22-6 in turrets is also absolutely ridiculous. So Perks gets to be in the photo shoot because he's such a photogenic, handsome-looking guy. But this is really an award for the entire G2 lineup. A bunch of guys didn't have any deaths throughout this week. And Jankos was landing his smites, and he had some perfectly choreographed and timed smites with the likes of Perks and Jankos. But this week there were a lot of moments where it looked like G2 was going to lose a lot of members, but they just got away by the skin of their teeth, escaping a lot of these fights. And they just seemed a lot more coordinated as a team. I mean, Wonder and Perks, I think, performed well to above average, I'd say, in the first couple of weeks. But it looked like Hjarnan and Wadid looked a lot better this week. Hjarnan was a guy who struggled, and Wadid, you see there, the fast fingers, Captain Jack McHale's moves there to keep Hjarnan alive. But that bottom lane looked a lot better in week 3. And overall, G2, Kings of Europe, not ready to redub them that title yet, but they definitely showed a lot of positive signs in week 3 and put up some absolutely ridiculous numbers. So G2, TSM, CLG, they're all climbing backwards, or climbing forwards, up. You can't climb forward. They're climbing up. You know what I'm talking about. We'll see what SKT can do in week 4 for all these former champs of the respective regions, because after this performance, SKT looks like the weakest of the TSM G2 trio. It wouldn't be an LCS week without some reportable players. It's always fun to look at the honorable guys who look great, but it's even more fun to look at the players and teams who struggled mightily coming into week 3. Let's start with NA again, and we've got the man who subbed in the jungle for FlyQuest. We're talking about Shrimp. I mean, first off, Onda had some up and down performances during the first couple of weeks, but Shrimp comes in here and there was no up or down. It was just down. KDA of 0.6 anytime you're below that old 1. You know, it's pretty brutal. His XP difference at 15, minus 940, which is the worst in the league so far. And that damage percentage was the worst among all junglers. 8.1, that is pretty bad. FlyQuest, not really sure what to think of this team yet. But I mean, I'm not sure why they were subbing out Onda so quickly. I mean, they were 2-2 with him. Yeah, some of the performances, basically on any champion outside of Zach, he wasn't looking too fantastic. But I mean, he's a young guy. He's a young talent. You gotta let him find his footing a little bit. I think it was a little early to sub him out. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. There might be more reasons as to why they did this. But I mean, Shrimp, a veteran guy who already had that synergy with Keen coming into this with their time on Dignitas, looked rough in this game. And I mean, this 2v2 here against Liquid was pretty much just the end of the game. Like, they got completely stomped by Liquid, and this 2v2 was one of the turning points. Shrimp just looked lost. He was invading when he shouldn't have been invading, didn't have enough vision, and he just get collapsed on here. As you can see, he eventually gets first blooded in this clip as well. So, I mean, the early game from Shrimp wasn't good at all. The mid game wasn't great, and the late game wasn't that great. He looked lost at times. He was kind of indecisive when to go in, when to go out, and a lot of it just ended with him walking back and forth and then walking too far forward and dying. Not really contributing a whole lot. That's why his damage numbers were so low, because a lot of the time he's hanging out on the outside of the fights. 0-2 week for FlyQuest. Not a great performance from Shrimp. We'll see who's hanging out in the jungle for FlyQuest going forward into next week. EU. Who's going to get reported? Usually this is just our staple moment to shout out someone from the Unicorns of Love. But this week, it's not a member of UOL. We're looking at Rocket's Memento in the jungle. And Rocket had a tough week. They were one of the many teams tied at 3-1 top of the standings heading into week 3. But Rocket and Memento in particular had a rough week. 0.8 KDA, again, sub 1, not great. Minus 353 experience at 15. Not as bad as Shrimp, almost a third as bad as Shrimp, but in the negatives, it's going to be bad. And the damage per minute, 177, pretty bad. Again, he played Sejuani one of these games, so the damage numbers aren't that big a deal. But the main sticking point for me for Memento this week was that play against Giants on the Camille where he tries to jump into the the Jinx, steal back playing the Jinx, and he gets hit by the Flame Chompers. That was the turning point in that game, the reason they lost that game. And then against Fnatic, Rocket just got absolutely clobbered. He had the 0-6-0 the dream scoreline. This is that Camille clip I was talking about. Oh, right onto the Flame Chompers. Then he gets hooked. Wombo combo doesn't do anything. But if you just avoid the Chompers, you can kill the Jinx, maybe win that fight, maybe win that game. Yeah, in these other games, he was doing his best Shrimp cosplay, just kind of running around, looked a little lost. And I mean, that Fnatic loss is not on Memento fully by any means. The whole Rocket team looked out of sorts in that one. But you got to pick someone to report in that post-game lobby, and I'm picking Memento in week 3. And he looked really solid through the first 2 weeks. But I think there's a lot of pressure on this guy to perform on that Rocket lineup because he's got to be the main playmaker on that squad. And when he's not delivering, the team looks not so great. And that's what happened to them in week 3. It's power rankings time. That's the moment that everyone wants to hear, wants to see after these weeks, how the standings flux, change, shimmy, shammy, all these words that don't make any sense when you're applying them to a power rankings. But there was definitely some movement in both EU and A after week 3. Let's start in the EU LCS, where teams like Vitality and Misfits were at the top last week, and they continue to be at the top this week, but they switched spots. You've got Vitality taking that top spot. I mean, I don't think you can really argue that right now. They put forward 2 solid performances in week 3, and their macro, they just completely outclassed Schalke. Schalke looked lost, and they played Unicorns in the second week, so that's an easy matchup. But Vitality looks great. Misfits, the only reason I'm keeping them at second is mainly because of the momentum from other weeks. They struggled versus Fnatic. They probably should not have lost that game, and they did lose to Splice. They had both games go over 50 minutes this week, so not closing games out confidently, but they're still in that top 2 spot because of how they looked in other weeks. Giants, I expect this to be their last week in that top 3. I barely kept them where they were last week, but they're still riding high due to some of their other wins as well, much like Misfits. They beat Rocket this week, which was a battle at the top of the standings, but based on how this week played out, I don't think Rocket is actually that strong a team, so that's not a huge win for Giants, and they lost to Schalke. G2, look at them rising up the ranks, 4 spots up from last week. They looked dominant. Yankos and Perks were combining for some fantastic objective control over Baron and Dragon. Neither game was really ever in doubt for them. They looked controlled in both of their matchups, and they looked more like the team we were expecting to see coming into this split. Splice, stay put at number 5. A win over Misfits was really big for them. Odo Wamne is still struggling, though. That is something to look at going forward. He was missing Ornn ultimates left, right, and center, and I thought it was just a week 1 thing, how badly he struggled and how bad he looked, but it turns out it might be a reoccurring theme going forwards, which is going to be a bit of an issue for Splice, but they looked pretty good. They were even behind early on a significant amount against Misfits and were able to come back into that one. Fnatic, people might be saying Fnatic's a little low, maybe put them ahead of Splice, similar to G2 because they beat G2 last week, but they did look dominant. They completely destroyed Rocket. That was a slaughter and should not have been allowed to be broadcast on Twitch. But again, Rocket, I think, is actually a weaker team than we maybe. I think the fact that they started out 3-1 was a bit of an anomaly. If Fnatic had beaten Misfits in that matchup, they'd probably be a lot higher. They'd probably be 4th ahead of G2, maybe even higher than that. But the fact that they could not close out that game really hurts them on this week's Power Rankings. They had a huge lead. They seemed to have all the control in the world, and they somehow managed to lose that game. So Fnatic, I expect them to keep climbing, though, going forward. Schalke, they looked lost against Vitality. They were completely outclassed in the macro game. They looked miles better against Giants. Again, I'm not 100% sure how good Giants is. I don't know how good Schalke actually is, but Nukeduck played out of his mind in that game on the AP Galio. What is an interesting pick ban going forwards is, what kind of Galio do you play? You still play him tank? Do you play him full AP? Obviously, full AP is a lot more interesting to see, but Nukeduck looked great on that. Roccat down 4 spots. They went 0-2 this week, and they did not look great. Again, they looked terrible against Fnatic. They had a chance in that Giants game. Maybe if they win, I mean, they had a chance to win that game. Giants did close it out and look like a much better team, but Roccat had a chance with that one Baron fight where Mementos Camille gets blasted by the Flame Chompers. But I think Rockat's going to be hanging around the bottom 3-4 spots going forward in the EU LCS. And look at this! The Unicorns, for the first time in 2018, are not dead last in the Power Rankings. They knocked off H2K in a battle of the worst to open things up, which is, again, a terrible debut game for week 3 of the LCS. But Unicorns looked actually not bad. They looked good against H2K. They didn't look great against Vitality, but I mean, that's right now the top team in the league. So Unicorns, congratulations on moving up to number 9. H2K, they look bad. They look very bad. They didn't have a chance in either of their games this week. G2 manhandled them pretty easily, and Unicorns never really looked back. They just kind of got an early lead and really snowballed that. I picked H2K to sneak into the playoffs in that 6th spot. That prediction looks absolutely ridiculous right now, and I look like a big idiot. Maybe they'll go on a run to close out the split, but right now, I can't see the squad making that 6th spot. If they continue to play like this, they'd be lucky to get that 6 upside down and get to 9th, because that seems to be the goal right now. That's EU. It's a little different than last week, but I mean, there's a couple teams still in the same spot. The top 3 is the same, just Vitality and Misfits switching spots. But I'll tell you what, Vitality, whew, they look legit. They look a lot better than I was expecting. Jizuki continues to impress on different champions. He's 1v2ing as Malzahar now in the bottom lane. He looks solid. People were maybe questioning, can this guy just only play Ryze? And that's why he dumps from people when he's not on Ryze. He looks great on Zoe. He looked good on Malzahar. Not like Malzahar's that hard a champion to play. I think most pro players could pick up Malzahar. But Vitality looks scary, and they look like a real threat to win the 2018 split. Let's go to NA. Everybody's favorite Power Rankings, it seems to be. The top 3, still similar, but you got to put Team Liquid number 1 after week 3, just because they absolutely clobbered their matchups this week. Yeah, it wasn't that hard a schedule, but I mean, FlyQuest and Golden Guardians both just, that looked like they were playing in a different league than Liquid was playing in. They slaughtered them both in under 30 minutes, and those games snowballed so quickly. They were pretty much over by 10 minutes. So Liquid looked super solid there. I can't really knock them for having an easy schedule. They knocked it out of the park with that one. They take the top spot from Echo Fox, who did drop a game to CLG, who, you know, I would say is a bad loss for Echo Fox, but I mean, CLG played super well and looked a heck of a lot better than last week, so it's not a huge loss for Echo Fox. They rebounded, were able to beat Optic, which they should have. If they lose that, maybe you start panicking, but I mean, 5-1, Echo Fox still looking really good. Cloud9 had another 2-0 week. You could maybe even put them above Echo Fox because they had the 2-0 as opposed to Echo Fox's 1-1, but Cloud9 continues to look super solid. Licorice, man, that guy continues to impress in the top lane. Smoothie looks like the best support in North America. His Alistar should probably be permabanned going forward. He has looked fantastic on that champion. His shot calling has obviously been great. Jensen looks great. Pretty much everyone on that team is looking solid. Cloud9 looks like a top-tier contender. 4th and 5th is where these power rankings get interesting and where people will probably be upset. Counterlogic Gaming is up 5 spots from last week. They were sitting in 9th, second last. They only had a win against Golden Guardians to their name, but this week again, complete 180. They looked fantastic. They stayed even with Echo Fox for pretty much the entire game, won a key team fight, boom, closed the game out, 5-0 ace. They looked great there and followed that up with another solid performance against FlyQuest. Again, I know that's not a top team. I mean, they're 9th on the power rankings, as you can see, but just that win over Echo Fox, they looked unbeatable coming into this week through the first 4 games, and CLG hands them their first loss. That's a heavily weighted win, and that's why they are skyrocketing up the standings. That's the main reason. Yes, the FlyQuest win. They'd be a little lower, of course, if they lost to FlyQuest, but the fact that they were able to do that, I'm doing a complete 180. I did not think CLG would be able to turn it around that quickly because they looked like the 2nd worst team in the NALCS the first couple of weeks and completely turned it around. Their buddies at TSM are also starting to turn it around. 2nd straight week, they've climbed up the power rankings instead of going down. 2-0 week for TSM, and one of those wins was over 100 Thieves, which is the main qualm people will probably have with this power ranking. How is a 4-2 team in 6th place when there's 2 3-3 teams above them? Well, I just told you Counterlogic Gaming beat Echo Fox, who were undefeated up to that point, had a super solid win there. And TSM beat 100 Thieves in a semi-convincing fashion. I mean, they were pretty much in control the entire game, except for one spot where they got a little too greedy trying to close out the game too early. Ended up giving Cody Sun a triple kill, but they were able to close it out from there. They didn't throw that game. They were in control the entire time. And 100 Thieves, the reason they're low, again, they lose to TSM, and they should have lost to Clutch Gaming. Clutch had that game in the bag. They just messed up their wombo combo, Jarvan, Galio, Shen on a team fight. They blew everything on Afromu, and 100 Thieves were able to get back into that game, but they barely won that game. They shouldn't have won that game. Really, they should be 3-3, and that is why they're sitting in that 6th spot, because they did not instill a lot of confidence going forward in that week 3, and that's why they're down 2 spots. That's why Counterlogic Gaming and TSM are way up the power rankings. Maybe it's a little bit of an overreaction, a quick 180 for CLG like that, but they look good, man. They looked a lot better than the last couple of weeks, and we'll see if that's what they're like going forward. Otherwise, if they go back to their first couple of weeks, then maybe they skyrocket back down these rankings. Number 7, Clutch. Again, they should have beaten 100 Thieves. You probably flip-flop them if they're able to do that. But they had an 0-2 week. It was a very tough week for them, 100 Thieves and Cloud9. Febiven looked great against Cloud9. Had some nice shockwaves, a couple 4-man shockwaves, but they were not able to get back into that game. Cloud9 won that one pretty convincingly. Lyra continues to struggle. I don't know what's going on there. Optic, another 0-2 week. They weren't in these games as well as they were earlier on in the weeks. That's why they're down 3 spots. I mean, you can only keep a 1-win team in the top 6 for so many weeks. There's still some close games for this squad. You got to feel like they're a little bit better than 1-5, and that's why I've got them ahead of FlyQuest, who are 2-4. FlyQuest had that 0-2 week. I think if Shrimp continues to play in that jungle position, they're going to stay 9th for the majority of the split. I liked having Onda in there to see what he was capable of, but I don't have a ton of confidence in FlyQuest. That's why they're hanging out. Bottom 2, 9th right now with a 2-4 record. Even though it's worse than Optic, I'm putting them below them. And number 10, Golden Guardians. They've already got issues outside of the game. Yeah, they can't win a game on the Rift, and outside of the Rift, they're firing their head coach for some inappropriate behavior and remarks that he made off camera. So the Golden Guardians is a whole mess. Good thing their NBA team is incredible and probably going to win another title this year, because in the LCS it's not looking so good. But those are actually your week 3 power rankings in NA. a lot different than last week. You've got the rise of the old gods in TSM and CLG coming up the standings. 4-0 week. We'll see if those guys can keep it up going forward. But there's definitely a distinct top three now in NA with C9, Liquid, and Echo Fox. They seem to be it's kind of in tiers right now, with that being your S tier or tier 1, those three squads. We'll see how that changes heading into week 4. And we're already almost at the midway point of the LCS season, which came pretty quickly. After next week, you're looking at there's only 9 weeks. These guys are only playing 18 games. So there's a lot of fluctuation in these power rankings from week to week just because you're only playing 2 games a week. There's not a whole lot of games to go off of. It's still hard to judge what these teams actually are. So we'll see that going forward. Make sure you're sending in your questions. We're about to get to those in a moment. But first, it wouldn't be a Get Boosted episode on a Monday without our Handshake of the Week. Handshakes of the week. You got to see what post-game hugs and high fives and fist bumps are the best from the week. And as per usual, we got to take a look at our boy Rick Fox from Echo Fox, because he's always there in the handshake lane, in the handshake line, waiting for his friends. He only got to go once this week, but look at that. He's got an all-tech face, and look at that smile. Look how happy the players are when they get to high five Rick Fox. I would be that happy too if I had that face staring at me after a win. I really don't like those signs with the faces, but he's got a rival this week, and that is Xmithy's dad, giving hugs to every player on Team Liquid. He's been doing this for years. It's great to see him hanging out with Xmithy and just being at pretty much every game. But he's hugging players that aren't even on Xmithy's team. Ex-teammates on CLG, Darshan, Huhi, and Stixay all got hugs from Xmithy's dad. That is commitment to your son's craft, even hugging his opponents, which maybe Xmithy wouldn't be too happy about that. But week 3 belongs to Rick Fox and Papa Xmithy for just sticking it out and staying in those handshake lines, because they can probably get pretty sweaty and smelly. There's a lot of people in a lot of those lines, but these guys are committed, and we will be keeping track of that handshake line going forward. There weren't any too many big gaffes with guys going in for a handshake, fist bump, not knowing which one to do. Teams did pretty well this week, but we will be following Rick Fox all split long, because he's just that interesting a character. But it's question time. Everybody's favorite time, where you guys can kind of direct the conversation so that you can stop listening to my annoying voice. All right, let's go. Inferno, who will win the spring split? If I'm going off what I've seen through the first couple of weeks, I feel like it's going to be what some people might say a boring rematch. I feel like Cloud9 might be one of the favorites to go there, as well as Liquid right now. I'm thinking, actually, that's not a boring rematch at all. What am I talking about? Liquid, Cloud9 looks like it might be the matchup for me, and I might favor Cloud9 just because Licorice is playing even better than I thought he was going to play, and I thought he'd have a pretty decent performance and have a chance at Rookie of the Split. But through the first 3-4 weeks, he should get 100% of those Rookie of the Split votes. And Smoothie is playing at an MVP level. Jensen, still a top-tier mid laner. Svenskeren seems to have fit in nicely. And Sneaky looks great. Liquid, they're dumpstering some teams I'd like to see. I need to see them against some of the more top-tier teams so far. I feel like Cloud9's has had a tougher schedule so far in 2018. Sakyon, will Echo Fox stay consistent after this first defeat? I mean, they rebounded pretty well with a win over Optic. If that was the first test, they drop a game. Oh no, are they going to blow it up for that week and go 0-2? They didn't. They rebounded fine in that one. I still think this is, if they keep playing like they have, they're going to be a top 6 team 100%. They're going to be a playoff contender, maybe a shot at semis, maybe a shot at the finals, but I think this is still a upper half tier team going forward in the NALCS. What do you think changed in Fnatic? Why they're playing better? They definitely did look better in week 3. Again, they should have won that Misfits series, or that Misfits game, but you saw some of the issues that they had come back in that Misfits series, and that's just playing. They like to play too passive a lot of the time. They're just playing reactive. They're not proactive. They just kind of sit back and wait for your teams to make a mistake, and a lot of the time, they don't make a mistake. So I thought bringing in a guy like Hillisang would actually help solve that issue, but it hasn't so far. But I mean, the main turnaround, Reckless played much better in week 3. He looked lights out against that in that Roccat game, but everyone did in that one. So I think Reckless playing a lot better, so has Dying Less, and Caps continues to play super well. But overall, the team looked to be more aggressive and assertive and really just confident. Do you think SKT will be back just like G2 and TSM? I don't think they will be in Spring Split. You look at the top half of the standings in the LCK, it is much more competitive than in NA and EU. Specifically EU, there's still so many question marks in that top 4, top 5, even Vitality at 5-1. I think they look solid. I think they'll stay near that top, but there are still question marks around them. There's a lot of rookies, unproven guys on the LCS stage. We'll see how they deal with the troubles that can come in the LCS, losing streaks, how they deal with that. SKT, that top half's nuts, man. You got Kingzone, KT Rolster. I mean, even Afrika's been looking super solid. Obviously, KSV, the defending champs. Afrika, Jin Air. I think all those teams are a lot better than SKT right now, especially when they're dropping games to MVP. So the climb back to the top tier of the LCK is a much more difficult climb than it is in NA or EU. And SKT just doesn't look that good. Blake Mushin, do you think Lyra has underperformed on Clutch? A decent amount of hype was put into this team at the beginning of the season. What would be the cause for blame of Clutch's negative record so far this split? I definitely think Lyra has underperformed so far in this spring split, and there was a lot of hype around Clutch. We had them at 4th in our preseason rankings, and they've shown moments where they can compete with some of these top-tier teams, but they've just been unable to close some of these games out. And Lyra has definitely been very underwhelming for them. He's probably been the weakest link on that squad, and that was a guy who was getting MVP votes, a former all-pro jungler in NA, and you thought you bring in a guy like Fabivin, that's only going to unleash Lyra even more. He'll be able to be more aggressive, but he's stuck on tank duty and not performing well on that really either. Maybe it's just because of some of the meta. I mean, right now it's carry top laners, tank junglers, tank supports. He doesn't seem as comfortable on a lot of these tank type champions. Like his Gragas was very underwhelming. His Zac hasn't looked that great. So I'm not really sure what's going on with Lyra. I do expect Clutch to look a little better than that. I think they can still compete for a playoff spot just because even in some of these losses, Fabivin has been playing super well, except for that game, week 1, where he got clobbered by Phoenix. But aside from that, he's looked pretty solid in the majority of these games. And a guy like Solo has exceeded my expectations. Apollo and Hakuo maybe performing not quite as well as I thought they would, but I mean, the first couple of weeks it was impossible to do anything in lane in that bot lane with the Relic Shield meta. Will Golden Guardians ever win a game? I don't know. It's looking tough for them right now. I mean, they had their chance against FlyQuest. I think FlyQuest is maybe the only other team they have a chance at beating right now, and they need Shrimp in the jungle for that matchup. But Golden Guardians are in a tier of their own right now compared to the rest of the NALCS squads, I feel like. And they'll have to improve in some way to win a game because they're just a level behind. They might need to pull out some cheese strats or some solid Snake Zed play from high where he backdoors or something. Some crazy shot calling, because right now they don't look like they got a chance against any of these other teams. Dud 190, despite a little stumble against Schalke this week, do you think Giants will continue to perform well, or is their 4-2 record more of a hoax? I think you're slowly starting to see a shift in those EU standings, kind of separating the pretenders from the contenders. You looked at those standings coming into this week with Giants and Roccat at the top of the board with 3-1. Well, Rockat's already starting to come down, and I think Giants will be doing the same over the next couple of weeks. I think that's the last time you're going to see them in the top 3, at least in our power rankings for sure, probably the standings as well. It was a hard-fought one against Roccat, but now, I mean, I think eventually that's going to be too bottom 4 teams going forward with the likes of G2 coming up, Fanatics rising. I think Schalke is going to continue to rise. They still have some macro issues they got to figure out, but I think you're going to see Giants sliding out of that top 6 position. Will Vitality still go to playoffs in spite of your previous predictions? Now, I had them coming in 7th, fighting with H2K for that final playoff spot. I thought that could go either way. Obviously, right now, that's looking completely wrong. H2K looks terrible, and Vitality looks super solid. And if they keep playing the way they are, they're definitely going to be a playoff team. And looking like they'll be in one of the top 3-4 seeds if they keep playing at the level they are. They're just a super fun team to watch, man. They're so excited about these wins, and the fact that they have Yamato Cannon as their coach yelling at the player cam anytime it cuts to him during a game about any Jizuki 1v2 outplay or any big play by his team. This team has a lot of excitement and a lot of drive. They want to win. You see any interview with Mini Trupax, he's fired up. This team wants to win and prove that they can compete at the LCS level, and so far, they're definitely proving it. And I was wrong with that prediction so far. They could choke. The Great J, can CLG and TSM continue their winning streak? If they keep playing the way that they did that week, I think they definitely could. They both had a tough matchup and an easy matchup. I mean, TSM 100 Thieves, CLG Echo Fox, and then Golden Guardians FlyQuest. So we'll see when they have a double tough matchup. But TSM looked a lot better. They were getting early game leads. They weren't relying on kills. They were playing a nice control game. Kills were like 2-2 in that 100 Thieves game, and they were up like 3,000 gold just in CS and getting some turrets. So they looked a lot better in lane, and we expected this team to win all 3 lanes pretty much every game to make Mike Young's job a whole lot easier. And I think a main key for TSM has been Mike Young's nerves. He's talked about it. You've seen it on TSM Legends. He's said he's felt nervous on stage a lot of the time. He's been worried about making a mistake, which is why he's been playing so passive. So I think he'll slowly get over that hump, and the team will look a lot better. Dr. Pelipper, who's in more danger of losing a playoff spot, CLG, TSM, or 100 Thieves? I mean, it's hard to say. Right now, all 3 of those teams look like they could be playoff squad teams going forward, playoff ready. Right now, I mean, Clutch is a team that could maybe slide in there, but I might say, I mean, if we're overreacting over last week, I'd probably say 100 Thieves, just because based on rosters, I expect CLG and TSM to be better. TSM, I would, again, be shocked if they missed playoffs. I can't see, it'd be hard-pressed to see CLG missing playoffs as well. I think 100 Thieves, they had a great start to the split, but you could maybe, I could see them being 3-3 right now. So I think out of them, I might have to go with 100 Thieves. Who would have more chance making it back to the top, CLG or TSM? I mean, you got to go with TSM again, just based on this roster. They're slowly developing chemistry, synergy, implementing Mithy as more of the main shot caller, and again, the nerves of Mike Young. But I mean, Hanser looked great last week. Bjergsen looked great. Pretty much everyone on that squad looked great there. And I mean, 4 of the 5 guys there have experienced winning an LCS split, and they know that is not decided in the first couple of weeks. So they're just used to winning. So they know what it takes to win. So I would take TSM. David Kloss says, Pobelter, the best mid NA. Woo, he's definitely performed better than I expected him to. This is a guy who's always been, he's had a lot of hype, but he's always kind of been in that mid-tier, mid-top tier, like that 4 to 5 range. But I think he's making a case for top 3. I mean, going forward, Jensen, Bjergsen, and Febevin, I don't know if anyone's going to take them out of that top 3, but I think you can slide Pobelter right in a tier below those 2 guys. Those 3 guys, excuse me. He's performed really well. 007 Vitamin D, what do you think of Fantasy League? I think it is a shame that Riot has not put more resources into that whole thing. When it first came out, everyone was super into it. It was great. It was a fun time. Everyone was playing. The casters were playing. They were implementing it into the broadcast, giving you guys who had the best fantasy players of the week, guys to look out for. But now there's just so little effort put into it. Even like the homepage is like 2 years old. They got pictures from guys who aren't even on those teams anymore. There's just no effort by Riot to, you know, make that content grow, which is a big shame because I really enjoyed it. The Great J, is Doublelift a really great AD carry, or is he just lucky because his team is good? I don't think you can doubt that Doublelift is a great AD carry. He's been a top tier AD carry in NA for his whole career, 7 years. It's just internationally he hasn't really performed that well, but there's no doubt that this guy is a solid AD carry, one of the best of all time in the Western scene. And I mean, it helps that he has a super good team right now, but one of the reasons that team is really good is because of his performance with Ole in the bottom lane. Who on Splice do you think will be the first to step up to Kobby's level and perform as well as him? You know, it is kind of a surprise that Splice is 3-3 when both their solo laners have at times struggled mightily. I think Niski has a better chance of kind of stepping up and performing higher level with Kobby. Kobby's probably, he's got the best start of his career to this split, and he's looking like one of the top 4 maybe AD carries in EU right now. Otawamne, I mentioned earlier in the show, has looked not good. He has not looked at the all-pro level that we've grown accustomed to out of the former H2K top laner. And Niski had some hype coming into this season after he performed pretty well at times on Envy. But I'm looking at either Niski or a guy like Xerxes. But again, the tank meta is not going to suit him too well in the jungle. So I think Niski will be the guy to step up and help out Kobby. He had a great Corki game against Misfits. So maybe it's just finding the right champions for him. Because Azir, he doesn't look that great. What do you think of TSM? I think they're still going to be a top-tier team. They're maybe not finish first in the regular season, but they're still going to be fighting for finals. And I think come summer 2018, they're going to be a dominant force in the NA LCS. Zach Attack 091, if SKT was in NA, where would you rank them? Wow, that's an interesting question. Usually you ask where a Korean team would be in NA and it's up. They'd be first, undefeated. But this iteration of SKT losing to MVP, I mean, if I put MVP in the NALCS, they'd be probably bottom 4, I feel like. So I can't believe that SKT would be bottom 4 in the NALCS. I want to say, I'll say 5th. Maybe throw them 5th, right ahead of someone like 100 Thieves if you're going off our power rankings. But they might be bad. They might even be worse than that. They do not look like a good team right now. And this is the most trying period of their of the establishment of this. I don't know what the hell I'm trying to say. This is the most trying time in SKT's history. That's it. We just got to reset the whole thing. Will SKT dominate summer, and will they win a single match at spring? Well, they've already got a match win, thankfully for them. So they've got that streak broken. But I don't even know if they're going to make playoffs in spring. Unless they make some big changes heading into summer. Maybe they bring in, I feel like they're going to bring in Marin. Maybe they bring in Marin and steal Teddy from Jin Air. And then that's a pretty good looking squad. I'd like to see them give some time to blossom in the jungle. But they got it. That's their main issue right now, is filling that void in the jungle role, because Blank, I don't know what's going on with him, but he is not performing at a competitive level, let alone at the level of the LCK right now. So they're going to have to make some changes to start dominating. Jizuki best mid EU or even the West right now. I'm not ready to proclaim the Italian Stallion the best mid in the West just yet. He has had an insane LCS debut. I mean, I'm waiting to see a bad performance or an off game from him, but he hasn't put it up yet. He's a bunch of different champions. He's performed on all of them. So he's a top mid laner in EU. I'm not ready to call him the best or the best in the West. There's just too few games to go off of to proclaim him the best in the West. I mean, you still got guys like Perks, Jensen, Bjergsen, Febiven. There's a lot of guys that are up there right now. Swift Oblivion. Do you think Phoenix is a good mid laner now with his recent performance, considering his lackluster past? So he had an insane split with Liquid, won MVP, and then it was down from there. Liquid struggled. He went to the challenger scene, was okay, and he's performed pretty fantastic on Echo Fox. He's played like one of the top tier mid laners in the league, and I think he's for sure overperformed in terms of my expectations. I expected him to be bottom 3, bottom 4 mid laners in the LCS right now. He's definitely not performing at that level. We'll see if he's able to keep it up. I think the meta is pretty great for him right now. I think Ryze and obviously Azir probably his best champion, are 2 champions that he performs super well on, and we'll see if he can keep doing it. But he's definitely performed better than I was expecting. Who is the best in each role in NA right now? Ooh, that's a tough question. Top lane, I'm going to go with Huni. Jungle, you might go with Dardoch, to be honest. This might just be an Echo Fox lineup. I think you go with Dardoch in the jungle. Mid lane, so far, best performing, it's probably either, it might be Jensen, Pobelter. Those are probably either of those guys. AD carry, double lift. Altec's been pretty fantastic and sneaky. I'd say sneaky or double lift. You throw in there. And support, it's Smoothie, hands down, no question. The Nasty. Do you think that Golden Guardians still have a chance? A chance to get a win, a chance to get in playoffs? They definitely don't have a chance to get into playoffs. 0-6 is too big a hole to dig yourself, especially when 3 of the top 6 teams are 5-1. And I haven't really seen anything that screams at me that they're going to win a game against a playoff caliber or top tier team anytime soon. I mean, when they made this roster, you kind of looked at it and you were like, just the pure talent level alone compared to all 9 other rosters, it was much weaker than theirs, and you're kind of seeing that in their performances in these games. They just don't have the same level of talent as a lot of the other squads. Actually, every single other squad in the NALCS. So times are going to be tough for the Guardians. Hopefully they can continue to grow. They got some young guys, definitely contracts. I expect maybe some changes are coming come summer for the Guardians. Do you think Misfits will win EU Spring? I think they have a pretty good chance. I picked Fnatic before this all started. Fnatic Schalke, which looks okay, I guess, right now. Fnatic looked dominant against Rocket, but in terms of Misfits, they had a step back week, I'll say, this week. They should have lost to Fnatic. They did lose to Splice. 2 50-plus minute games that they weren't able to close out in a convincing fashion or at all. But I still think this will be a contending team to take home the spring split. But I will say Senkux has been a little underwhelming, and he's a bit of a question mark for me, especially with some of the performances we're seeing out of guys like Caps, Nukduck, Jizuki. I think Senkux is a noticeable tier below those guys, and that could be an issue come playoff time in a best of series when the champion pools are getting a little thin in that mid lane, because those guys, I didn't even mention Perks there. Perks has been playing out of his mind as well. So Senkux might be a limiting factor for Misfits. All right, last question here we're going to get out on this one. Is there a specific person on UOL who is to blame for their record, or is it a team effort? I don't think you can pinpoint. The heaviest load of the blame would probably go to Exile, if you're asking me, but he did look a lot better in this week. Week 2, he looked brutal. Week 3, he rebounded, looked a lot better. You're just looking for that consistency out of him. But, I mean, this is another team that was just kind of mashed together. The only inherent synergy coming into this split was with Samix and Exile. And, I mean, sure, synergy between your AD carry and mid laner is great for team fighting and just stuff like that. But, I mean, in terms of setting up vision, setting up plays around the map, macro, anything like that, that's not the biggest synergy you need going forward. So this team was just kind of mishmashed together. They're still figuring things out. There's still a lot of issues. I know they're up to 9 on the power rankings, but there's still a lot for the Unicorns to figure out going forward. And Cold finally figured out that it's a tank meta in the jungle. So he's playing these tank junglers, and look at that. They got a win. The carry junglers, the Kayn, Rengar, stuff like that, wasn't working out so well for him because everyone's playing tanks. And that's how they got their win, but there's a lot of issues still for the Unicorns of Love. That's it. Thank you very much for the questions. as always. We appreciate you sending them in, and apologies if we did not get to them all or missed yours. If you want some more questions answered, send us some questions at Twitter at ShotCallers Esports _SC Esports on Twitter, and we will definitely answer them if you're shouting out to us. We'll be back on Wednesday, 5v5 Live. We'll be previewing all the LCS matches. Not all the LCS matches. That's like 20 games. We'll be previewing some of the key matchups heading into Week 4, as well as a little bit of a LCK recap from the morning of. You've got KT Rolster taking on Kingzone. So that'll be a very interesting matchup. So we'll have some LCK stuff as well as the LCS previews. And don't worry, Mark will be back in studio, so you'll have a break from my unbelievably obnoxious voice. But we'll be back on Wednesday, 2 p.m. for 5v5 Live, and I'll see you then.